I never thought I'd be the one to tear our family apart. Growing up in Boston, I was always the peacemaker, the one who smoothed things over when Mom and Dad fought, the shoulder my younger sister Abby cried on. Saint Emma, Dad used to call me with a wink. But saints have breaking points too, and mine came on a chilly October evening last year. The maple trees outside our suburban home had turned brilliant shades of red and orange, but inside, our family dinner felt as cold as the approaching winter. Mom was pushing food around her plate, Dad was checking emails on his phone, and Abby, now 17 and full of teenage angst, was texting under the table. I'd just returned from my second year of college for the weekend, hoping things would be better than when I'd left. They weren't. Could we maybe talk? I suggested, setting down my fork. Like an actual conversation? Dad grunted without looking up. Mom forced a smile. Of course, honey. How are your classes going? They're fine, I said. But that's not what I meant. I want to talk about us. About this. I gestured around the table. Whatever this is. We barely speak anymore. Abby snorted, finally looking up from her phone. Welcome home, Emma. Nothing's changed. Dad finally put his phone down with a sigh. Emma, we're all just busy. That's life. Not everything needs to be a therapy session. The dismissal stung, but I'd expected it. Dad had become increasingly distant over the past few years, burying himself in work at his law firm after his partner retired. Mom had responded by throwing herself into her volunteer work and book clubs. Anything to fill the growing silence between them. I found something, I said quietly, my heart hammering against my ribs. And I need to know if you were ever going to tell us. The room went still. Mom's fork clattered against her plate. Emma, she warned, her voice tight. Tell us what? Abby asked, suddenly interested. I took a deep breath. 2 weeks ago, while looking for my birth certificate for a passport renewal, I'd found papers in Dad's office. Divorce papers, drafted but unsigned, dated from 3 years ago. Along with them were bank statements showing a separate account I'd never seen before, and emails between Dad and a realtor about apartments in the city. Dad's been planning to leave, I said, looking straight at him. For years now. The color drained from Dad's face. Mom closed her eyes, her shoulders slumping as if under an invisible weight. You went through my office? Dad's voice was dangerously quiet. That's what you're worried about? I shot back. Not the fact that you've been lying to all of us? Abby looked between us, confused. What are you talking about? I turned to her. Dad has divorce papers. He's been hiding money, planning his escape while pretending everything's fine. That's enough. Dad slammed his hand on the table, making the dishes jump. You have no idea what you're talking about, Emma. Adult relationships are complicated. Don't talk to me like I'm a child, I said, my voice shaking. I'm 20 years old. I deserved to know if my family was falling apart. Mom finally spoke, her voice eerily calm. Richard, just tell them. They deserve to know. Dad ran a hand over his face. He suddenly looked older, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. It's not what you think, he said finally. Then what is it? I demanded. He exchanged a look with Mom, some silent communication passing between them that excluded Abby and me, as always. Your mother and we've been struggling for a long time. Yes, I consulted a divorce attorney. Yes, I looked at apartments. But we decided to try to work things out. When? I asked. When did you decide this? Last year, Mom said softly. We've been seeing a marriage counselor. We didn't want to worry you girls while you were focusing on school. I laughed bitterly. So instead you just pretended everything was fine? Do you have any idea what that's been like for us? Living in this mausoleum of a marriage? Abby stood up suddenly, her chair scraping against the floor. I'm out of here, she muttered, tears welling in her eyes. Abby, wait! Mom called, but she was already gone, her footsteps pounding up the stairs. See what you've done, Dad said, turning his anger on me. This is exactly why we didn't tell you. You always have to push, Emma. You couldn't just leave it alone. Something inside me snapped. All the years of playing mediator, of swallowing my own feelings to keep the peace, came rushing to the surface. No, Dad. See what you've done. You and Mom both. You think Abby and I didn't know something was wrong? We've been living with your silences, your separate lives, your tension for years. You think we can't feel it? It's like living in a house that's slowly filling with carbon monoxide. We're all suffocating, but nobody will open a window. Mom started crying quietly, her shoulders shaking. Dad looked away, jaw clenched. "I'm sorry we're such a disappointment to you," he said coldly. "That's not what I meant, and you know it." I stood up, suddenly needing air. "I'm going to check on Abby." I found her in her room, headphones on, angrily shoving clothes into her backpack. "Where are you going?" I asked, after she reluctantly removed her headphones. "Jen's house. Her parents are cool. They actually talk to each other." I sat on her bed. "I'm sorry I dropped all that on you. I should have told you privately first." Abby shrugged, but I could see she was hurting. "Whatever. I knew something was up. Dad's barely been home for months. When he is, he and Mom act like polite roommates." She zipped her bag with unnecessary force. "Did you know he missed my choir concert last month? He said he had a work thing, but I saw him leaving the house in jeans. Who wears jeans to a law firm emergency?" The implication hung in the air between us. I hadn't wanted to consider that possibility, but now it seemed obvious. "You think he's seeing someone else?" Abby shrugged again. "I don't know. Maybe. Would explain why he's been working late so much." I felt sick. "Have you asked Mom about it?" "Are you kidding? Mom's in denial about everything. She just keeps joining more committees and book clubs like if she's busy enough, she won't notice her marriage is dead." She slung her backpack over her shoulder. "I'll be at Jen's. Don't wait up." After she left, I stood in the hallway, listening to the strained voices of my parents downstairs. They weren't shouting. They never shouted. But their hushed intensity was somehow worse. Never meant for it to go this far. The girls deserve better. Can't just walk away after 23 years. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor, my knees pulled to my chest. This was my fault. I'd forced everything into the open, thinking the truth would somehow fix things, but some truths just create more damage. My phone buzzed with a text from Abby. "Made it to Jen's. You okay?" I stared at the message, unsure how to respond. Was I okay? Were any of us? "I'm fine," I typed back. "Call if you need me." But as the voices downstairs grew louder, I knew nothing was fine. Not anymore. And I wasn't sure it ever would be again. 3 days passed in a fog of tense silences and slammed doors. Abby refused to come home from Jen's house, communicating with Mom only through terse text messages. Dad had taken to sleeping in his home office, and Mom moved through the house like a ghost, her eyes red-rimmed and distant. I'd meant to return to campus after the weekend, but how could I leave when everything was falling apart? Tuesday morning, I found Mom sitting at the kitchen table, clutching a mug of cold coffee and staring out the window at our neglected backyard. The bird feeder Dad had built years ago hung empty, swaying slightly in the autumn breeze. "Hey," I said softly, not wanting to startle her. She glanced up, attempting a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Morning, sweetie. I thought you'd be heading back to school by now." I sat across from her, noticing how exhausted she looked. The fine lines around her eyes seemed deeper. Her blonde hair, usually perfectly styled, pulled back in a messy ponytail. "I can't leave like this, Mom. Not with everything." I gestured vaguely, unable to find the right words. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "This isn't your burden to carry, Emma. Your father and I made this mess. We'll figure it out." "Is it true?" I asked. The question that had been burning inside me for days. "Is Dad having an affair?" Mom flinched as if I'd slapped her, then slowly shook her head. "No, at least not in the way you're thinking." "What does that mean?" She sighed, tracing the rim of her mug with her finger. "Your father isn't seeing another woman, Emma. He's been struggling with things you don't know about. Things I've tried to help him with." A chill ran through me. "Is he sick?" "Not physically." She hesitated, clearly weighing how much to say. "Your father has been battling depression for years. It got worse after his father died, and then when the law firm restructured, and he lost his position as managing partner." She trailed off, her eyes filling with tears. I sat back, stunned. Dad? Depression? The man who coached my soccer team, who taught me to drive, who always seemed so confident and in control. But he seemed so Normal, I said lamely. Mom gave me a sad smile. That's what depression does sometimes. It hides. The separate bank account you found? That's money he set aside for treatment programs. The apartment research was during a particularly bad episode last year when he convinced himself we'd all be better off without him. My mind was spinning, trying to reconcile this new information with the father I'd always known. Why didn't you tell us? He didn't want you to know. He was ashamed, Emma. You know your father. He prides himself on being the provider, the protector. Admitting he couldn't control his own mind felt like failure to him. She wiped away a tear. I respected his wishes. Maybe for too long. I thought I could fix everything myself, that if I just loved him enough, he'd get better. A heavy weight settled in my chest. And the divorce papers? Those were real, she admitted. After one particularly bad night, he told me I deserved better, that he was holding me back. He had the papers drawn up the next day. I refused to sign them. Her voice hardened. I wasn't going to let him push me away when he needed me most. I thought about all the times over the past few years when Dad had seemed distant or irritable, when he'd missed family events or spent entire weekends in his office. I'd attributed it to work stress or typical dad behavior. Now, everything was being reframed in a painful new light. Does Abby know? Mom shook her head. Your father didn't want either of you to worry or see him differently. So you've both been carrying this alone? For years? The unfairness of it made my throat tight. Why? We're a family. We're supposed to help each other. Oh, Emma. Mom reached for my hand again. You were just starting college, finding your way. Abby was already struggling with her own anxiety. We didn't want to burden you. That wasn't your decision to make, I said, pulling my hand away. We deserved to know. You're right, said a voice from the doorway. Dad stood there, looking rumpled in yesterday's clothes, his silver-flecked hair uncombed. He'd lost weight, I realized suddenly. His wedding ring looked loose on his finger. I should have told you both years ago, he continued, stepping into the kitchen. I was just ashamed and scared. Scared that you'd think less of me. Dad, I started, but he held up a hand. Let me finish, please. He pulled out a chair and sat heavily. I've spent so long trying to be the father I thought you deserved. Strong, dependable, always in control. But the truth is, I'm none of those things. Not really. His voice cracked. The depression started before you were born, actually. It comes and goes. For years, I managed it with medication, therapy. Your mother has been my rock through all of it. He reached for Mom's hand, and she gave it to him, their fingers interlacing with the ease of long practice. But after my father died, something broke inside me. I couldn't fix it this time. The medication stopped working. The therapy felt pointless. I started pulling away from everyone, convincing myself you'd all be better off without me dragging you down. That's not true, I whispered, tears spilling down my cheeks. I know that now, or I'm trying to know it. He drew a shaky breath. The divorce papers weren't because I stopped loving your mother. They were because I loved her too much to keep hurting her. Mom squeezed his hand, and I refused to give up on us. But you've been so distant with each other, I said, confused. If you're not breaking up, why does it feel like you already have? They exchanged a look that held years of complicated history. Because we're both exhausted, Mom admitted. I've been trying to protect him, to fix everything, to keep our family running while pretending nothing's wrong. And your father, I've been drowning. Dad finished simply. Some days just getting out of bed feels impossible. I love you all so much, but depression lies to you. It tells you you're a burden, that everyone would be happier without you. And after a while, you start to believe it. I thought of all the family dinners where he'd been physically present but mentally elsewhere. All the times he'd snapped at us over small things. All the weekends he'd spent alone in his office while life went on without him. The night you found those papers, he continued, your mother and I had just come from a counseling session. We were actually making progress. I've started a new medication that seems to be helping. For the first time in years, I was feeling hopeful. And then I blew it all up, I said, the guilt crushing me. No. Dad's voice was firm. No, Emma. This isn't your fault. You did what anyone would do when they found evidence their family was falling apart. You tried to protect your sister, You demanded the truth. I'm proud of you for that. I looked up, surprised by the warmth in his voice. I should have told you both years ago, he said. My own father never talked about his struggles, never admitted any weakness. I swore I'd be different with my kids, but when it came down to it, I fell back on what I knew. Silence, denial, keeping up appearances. He shook his head. I was wrong. Mom squeezed his hand again, then looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. We both were. We thought we were protecting you girls, but we were just teaching you to hide your pain and pretend everything's fine. That's not what we want for either of you. I felt tears streaming down my face, but didn't bother wiping them away. What happens now? Dad sighed. Now we need to talk to your sister. All of us together. No more secrets. She's still at Jen's, I said. She thinks you're having an affair. Dad closed his eyes, pain crossing his features. God, I've made such a mess of things. Mom stood up and came around the table, wrapping her arms around him from behind. It was the most affection I'd seen between them in years. Call her, Mom said to me. Ask her to come home. Tell her we need to start over. As a family. I nodded, pulling out my phone, but hesitated. What if she won't come? Then we'll go to her, Dad said, his voice stronger than before. I'm done hiding, Emma. I'm done pretending I'm fine when I'm not. I'm done letting this disease steal my family from me. As I dialed Abby's number, I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but understanding. And maybe, just maybe, the first fragile threads of hope. Convincing Abby to come home wasn't easy. Why should I? She demanded over the phone, her voice sharp with hurt. So they can feed me more lies. It's not like that, I said, stepping onto the back porch for privacy. The wooden swing Dad had built when we were kids creaked beneath me as I sat down. There's stuff going on that we didn't know about. Important stuff. They want to explain everything. For real this time. Whatever, she muttered. But I could hear the curiosity beneath her defiance. Please, Abs, I said, using my old nickname for her. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. After a long pause, she sighed. Fine. But I'm not staying if it's just more BS. An hour later, we were all gathered in the living room. The same room where we'd opened Christmas presents and celebrated birthdays, where Dad had taught me to play chess, and Mom had helped Abby practice for her school play. Now it felt like a courtroom, with Abby perched defensively on the edge of the armchair, arms crossed, waiting for the verdict. Dad sat forward on the couch, hands clasped between his knees, shoulders hunched as if carrying an invisible weight. Mom sat beside him, close but not touching, her anxiety visible in the way she kept smoothing her pants. Thank you for coming, Dad began, his voice rough. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. Abby said nothing, just stared at him with eyes so like his own, deep brown and stubborn. Dad took a deep breath and started talking. He told her everything he'd told me that morning about his depression, about the dark thoughts that had plagued him for years, about the shame that had kept him silent. As he spoke, I watched my sister's face change, the angry mask slowly giving way to confusion, then shock, then a complicated mix of emotions I couldn't fully read. So all those times you missed my stuff, she said when he finally finished. All those nights you were working late. I was either at therapy sessions or... He hesitated, then forced himself to continue. Or sometimes, I was just sitting in my car in the parking garage at work, unable to face coming home and pretending to be okay. I was afraid you'd see through me, see how broken I really was. Abby's eyes filled with tears. You thought I'd care that you were sick? That I'd what? Love you less? It wasn't rational, Dad admitted. Depression rarely is. I didn't want to be the dad who couldn't get out of bed some days, who cried in the shower, who had to fake every smile. You deserved better than that. I deserved the truth, Abby said, her voice cracking. I thought... She stopped, wiping angrily at her eyes. I thought you didn't care about us anymore. That you were bored with your family. Mom made a small sound of distress. Oh, Abby, no. Your father loves you more than anything in this world. Then why did Emma find divorce papers? Abby demanded, turning her anger toward Mom now. If you two are so committed to each other, what was that about? Mom and Dad exchanged a glance. And Dad nodded slightly, giving her permission to explain. Last winter, your father hit a very low point, Mom said quietly. He became convinced that he was ruining our lives, that we'd all be happier without him. He wanted to set me free, as he put it. Her voice caught. He even talked about ending things. I felt my blood run cold. You were suicidal? I whispered, looking at Dad. He nodded slowly, not meeting my eyes. There were some dark days where it seemed like the only way to stop the pain. He swallowed hard. Your mother realized how bad things had gotten and made me promise to get help. Real help, not just the occasional therapy session. That's when I checked into the treatment center in Vermont. The business trip, Abby said, realization dawning. That 2-week consulting job in February. You weren't on a business trip at all. No, Dad admitted. I was in an intensive program for depression and suicidal ideation. Your mother told you I was traveling to protect my privacy, but she visited me every weekend. I remembered those weekends. Mom claiming she was visiting her college roommate in Burlington, coming home looking tired, but somehow lighter. I'd been so wrapped up in my own life, I'd never questioned it. The program helped, Dad continued. It gave me tools, medication, a support system. But most importantly, it helped me see that running away, whether through divorce or worse, wasn't the answer. My problems would just follow me, and I'd leave behind a family in pain. So you're staying together? Abby asked, looking between them. We're working on it, Mom said cautiously. The counseling is helping. Your father is committed to his treatment plan. But it's not simple or easy. Depression doesn't just disappear overnight. And what about us? Abby gestured between herself and me. Where do we fit in this new honest family? Dad leaned forward. That's partly why we wanted to talk to you both. We've been so focused on managing my illness and keeping up appearances that we've neglected what matters most. Being a real family. That changes now. How? I asked. For starters, no more secrets, Mom said firmly. Your father and I have agreed that you girls are old enough to know what's happening, good and bad. We want to include you in this journey, if you're willing. And I want to be more present, Dad added. Even on the bad days, especially on the bad days. I don't want to miss any more concerts or games or family dinners because I'm hiding. Abby looked at him skeptically. Just like that? You're magically better now? Dad shook his head. No, not at all. I'll have good days and bad days. The medication helps, but it's not perfect. There will still be times when getting out of bed feels like climbing Mount Everest. He paused, choosing his words carefully. But the difference is, I won't pretend anymore. If I'm struggling, I'll say so. I won't just disappear. And if he starts to slip back into old patterns, Mom added, I won't cover for him or make excuses. That wasn't helping anyone. We all sat in silence for a moment, absorbing the weight of everything that had been said. Outside, raindrops began to patter against the windows, a gentle autumn shower settling over the neighborhood. I don't know if I can trust you, Abby finally said, her voice small. Either of you. You've been lying to us for years. We have, Dad acknowledged, and rebuilding that trust will take time. We don't expect you to forgive us overnight. We just ask for a chance, Mom added softly. A chance to be the family we should have been all along. Abby looked at me, a silent question in her eyes. What do you think? I took a deep breath. I think I'm still processing everything. But I know I don't want to lose my family. I turned to Dad. I'm glad you're getting help, and I'm really glad you didn't. I couldn't finish the sentence. Leave, Dad supplied gently. Me too. Abby stood up suddenly, arms still crossed protectively over her chest. I need to think. This is a lot. Her voice wavered slightly, betraying the emotions she was trying to hide. Dad nodded, understanding in his eyes. Take all the time you need. We're not going anywhere. Promise? The word slipped out, childlike and vulnerable, revealing the scared kid beneath Abby's tough exterior. Dad stood and took a tentative step toward her. I promise. No more running away. Abby hesitated for just a moment before stepping into his open arms. She looked so small, pressed against his chest, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Dad held her tightly, tears streaming down his face as he murmured apologies into her hair. Mom moved to join them, wrapping her arms around them both. She caught my eye over Abby's shoulder and extended one hand to me, inviting me into their circle. I hesitated, still feeling the weight of everything we'd learned, the years of secrets, the pain we hadn't been allowed to see or share. Part of me wanted to hold on to my anger, to punish them for shutting us out for so long. But as I looked at them standing there, finally honest in their brokenness, I realized something. This moment, this raw, imperfect, painful moment, was more real than all the carefully maintained family dinners and holiday photos of the past few years combined. I stood and took my mother's outstretched hand, allowing myself to be pulled into their embrace. We stood there together, all four of us, crying and holding each other as the rain fell outside. Nothing was fixed. Nothing was perfect. The road ahead would be long and probably difficult. But for the first time in years, we were facing it together. No more masks. No more pretending. Just us. A real family with real problems. Finally brave enough to admit it. As we slowly pulled apart, Dad kept one arm around Abby and reached for my hand with the other. "I don't know what happens next," he admitted. "But I do know I'm done hiding from the people I love most in this world. One day at a time," Mom said, wiping her eyes. "That's all any of us can do." Abby sniffled and gave a watery laugh. "Does this mean we actually have to talk at dinner now? Like, about real stuff?" Dad smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Yeah, kiddo. I'm afraid it does." "Well," I said, squeezing Dad's hand, "I think we have a lot to catch up on." 2 weeks after our family's truth bomb, I reluctantly returned to campus at my parents' insistence. "Your education matters," Mom had said, hugging me tight. "We'll be okay." Dad had nodded in agreement, promising to text me daily updates, good or bad. It felt strange leaving them, like abandoning ship just as repairs were beginning. But Abby had decided to move back home from Jen's house, and somehow that made it easier to go. My dorm room felt foreign when I returned, like it belonged to someone else, someone who didn't know what I now knew. My roommate Kelly greeted me with her usual cheerful energy, chattering about a party I'd missed, and a cute guy from her psychology class. "Earth to Emma," she said, waving a hand in front of my face. "You okay? You seem a million miles away." I smiled weakly. "Just tired from the drive." I couldn't explain what was really happening. How do you casually mention that your seemingly perfect family had been a carefully constructed illusion for years? That your father had been silently drowning while everyone pretended not to notice the water rising? So I said nothing, adding another secret to the pile. The next morning, true to his word, Dad texted, "Decent day so far. Taking my meds. Missing you. Love, Dad." It was simple, but the honesty in it made my throat tight. I sent back a heart emoji, not trusting myself with words. Days passed in a blur of classes and assignments. I went through the motions, but my mind kept drifting home. Each night I'd call to check in. Sometimes Mom would answer, her voice carefully optimistic as she reported on Dad's therapy sessions or Abby's latest school drama. Sometimes Abby herself would pick up, offering blunt assessments like, "Dad's having a bad day, but at least he's not hiding in his office pretending to work." And sometimes Dad would answer. Those calls were the hardest, hearing him struggle to articulate his darkest thoughts, to name the depression that had been an unnamed shadow in our house for so long. "The new medication makes me feel foggy," he admitted one evening, "but the psychiatrist says that should pass. In the meantime, I'm trying to be patient with myself." "That's good, Dad," I said, wondering when our roles had reversed, when I'd become the reassuring parent and he the uncertain child. "How are your classes?" he asked, clearly trying to shift focus from himself. "They're fine." I hesitated, then decided to practice the honesty we'd all promised each other. "Actually, I'm having trouble concentrating. I keep thinking about home." Dad was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry, Emma. The last thing I wanted was for my problems to interfere with your life. It's not like that," I said quickly. "I'm just adjusting. We all are. I've been thinking," he said slowly. "Maybe you and Abby should talk to someone too. A therapist, I mean. This has been a lot for both of you to process." The suggestion surprised me. "You think we need therapy?" "I think everyone could use someone objective to talk to, especially when their family is going through changes." Your mom started seeing someone too. It's helping her work through her own feelings about everything. I hadn't considered that Mom might need support too. In my mind, she'd always been the strong one, the glue holding us all together. The thought that she might be struggling with her own emotions hadn't occurred to me. I'll think about it, I promised. A month into this new reality, I came home for a weekend visit. The house felt different somehow. Not magically healed, but more authentic. There were visible signs of change. A magnetic weekly pill organizer on the fridge tracking Dad's medications. A family calendar in the kitchen where everyone recorded their therapy appointments and commitments. Notes stuck to the bathroom mirror with affirmations I recognized from mental health websites. Most striking was the dining room table, now cleared of the paperwork and clutter that had accumulated over years of disuse. "We eat dinner together every night now," Abby told me as she helped me carry my laundry upstairs. "Like, at the table, with actual conversation. It's weird but kinda nice." "Seriously? Every night?" She nodded. "Dad's rule, even on bad days. Sometimes he doesn't say much, but he's there." She shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant, but I could see what it meant to her. "And we talk about real stuff. Not just school and weather, but like feelings and crap." I laughed. "Sounds excruciating." "It was at first," she admitted. "But it's getting easier. And Mom's cooking actual meals again instead of just ordering takeout. Did you know she used to be really into cooking? She made this chicken thing last night that was insane." The details were small but significant. A family slowly finding its way back to each other. That evening, as promised, we gathered around the dining table. Dad looked tired but present, asking about my classes with genuine interest. Mom served a homemade lasagna that filled the house with the scent of garlic and herbs. Abby complained about her calculus teacher with dramatic flair, making us all laugh. After dinner, Dad cleared his throat. "Your mother and I have been talking," he began, "about making some bigger changes." Mom reached for his hand, supporting whatever was coming. "I've decided to take a leave of absence from the firm," he continued. 3 months, maybe longer. My partners have been surprisingly understanding. "Is that good?" I asked, unsure how to react. Dad's identity had always been so wrapped up in his work. He nodded slowly. "I think so. The pressure was crushing me. Trying to perform at that level while fighting this battle in my head. I just can't do both right now." "What will you do instead?" Abby asked. "Focus on getting better. Proper rest. Regular therapy. Maybe volunteer a few hours a week at the legal aid clinic. Something meaningful but lower pressure." He smiled faintly. "And I thought maybe I'd take up woodworking again. I used to enjoy that before life got in the way." Mom finished for him. I remembered the birdhouse, the porch swing, the bookshelf in my childhood bedroom. All projects Dad had completed when Abby and I were small. I hadn't seen him build anything in years. "I think that sounds perfect," I said, meaning it. Later that night, unable to sleep, I wandered downstairs for a glass of water and found Mom sitting alone in the dark living room, scrolling through old family photos on her iPad. "Can't sleep?" she asked, patting the space beside her. I shook my head and joined her on the couch. On the screen was a photo from about 10 years ago, a beach vacation in Cape Cod. We were all smiling, squinting against the sun, sand in our hair and sunburn on our noses. "We were happy then," I said, studying Dad's relaxed expression in the photo. Mom nodded. "We were. The depression comes in waves. That was during a good period." She swiped to another photo, this one from my high school graduation. Dad's smile looked more strained, his eyes lacking the light from the beach photo. It got worse after this. His father's death, the law firm changes, you leaving for college. It all piled up. "I wish I'd known," I said softly. "Maybe I could have helped somehow." Mom set down the iPad and turned to face me. "Emma, listen to me. This was never your responsibility to fix. Your father and I made mistakes by keeping you in the dark, but please don't think you could have prevented any of this. Depression doesn't work that way. I know that logically," I admitted. "But it's hard not to wonder if I missed signs I should have seen." "We all missed signs," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Or saw them, and looked away because facing them was too frightening." She squeezed my hand. "But we're not doing that anymore. That's the important part. I leaned my head against her shoulder, breathing in her familiar scent of vanilla lotion and herbal tea. Do you think he'll be okay? Really okay? She was quiet for a long moment. I think he's finally fighting for himself instead of against himself, and that's something he hasn't done in a very long time. It wasn't a guarantee. It wasn't even particularly reassuring, but it was honest. And somehow, that made it easier to believe than any false promise would have been. 3 months into our family's new normal, I came home for Thanksgiving break to find the house transformed. Dad had painted the living room a warm sage green, replacing the faded beige that had been there since we moved in. Family photos that had been tucked away in albums for years now lined the hallway. Not just the perfect holiday card moments, but candid shots capturing real life. Abby missing her front teeth, me with awkward braces, Mom and Dad dancing in the kitchen. "Welcome home, stranger," Abby said, meeting me at the door with an uncharacteristic hug. She'd started growing out her hair. The blue streak she'd maintained as a rebellion now faded to a pale turquoise tip. "The house looks amazing," I said, dropping my bags in the entryway. "Dad's been on a home improvement kick. Wait till you see the backyard." Dad appeared from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He looked different. He'd lost the pallor that had become so familiar I'd stopped noticing it. He'd gained back some weight, and his clothes, jeans and a flannel shirt instead of his usual business casual, fit him properly again. "There's my girl," he said, pulling me into a bear hug that smelled of sawdust and mint tea. Over his shoulder, I caught Mom's eye. She gave me a small, cautious smile and mouthed, "Good day." I nodded, understanding our new shorthand. Some days were good, some weren't. Today was good. The backyard had indeed been transformed. The neglected lawn was neatly trimmed, the flower beds cleared of weeds and prepped for spring planting. Most striking was a new wooden deck extending from the back door, with a handcrafted picnic table at its center. "You built this?" I asked in disbelief as Dad proudly showed me around. "Your old man's still got some skills," he said with a grin. "The physical work helps clear my head." That evening, as we sat around the table for Thanksgiving dinner, I felt a cautious optimism settle over me. The food was delicious, the conversation flowed naturally, and no one was checking emails or hiding behind screens. Dad carved the turkey with theatrical flair, making Abby roll her eyes and Mom laugh. When he proposed a toast to new beginnings, we all raised our glasses without hesitation. It felt almost too good to be true. And maybe it was. The storm hit the morning after Thanksgiving. I woke to the sound of breaking glass downstairs. For a disoriented moment, I thought someone had broken in. Then I heard my father's voice, a raw, angry sound I barely recognized. Abby appeared in my doorway, eyes wide. "Something's wrong," she whispered unnecessarily. We crept downstairs together to find Mom cleaning up shards of a coffee mug from the kitchen floor, while Dad paced the living room, running his hands through his hair in agitation. "I'm sorry," he was saying, voice ragged. I'm sorry," the mantra repeated, growing more desperate with each iteration. Mom looked up as we entered, her face tight with concern. "Girls, maybe you should go back upstairs." "What happened?" I asked, ignoring her suggestion. Dad turned at the sound of my voice, and the naked anguish on his face made me step back. His eyes were red-rimmed, his expression haunted. "I forgot my medication," he said hollowly. 3 days now. With all the holiday preparations, I just forgot. "It's okay," Mom said, dumping the broken pieces into the trash. "You can take it now. We'll get back on track." "It's not okay." Dad's voice rose sharply. "Don't you understand? I was feeling better, so I got careless. That's how it always happens. I think I'm fixed, I get sloppy, and then..." He gestured at the broken mug. "Then I'm throwing things because the noise in my head is too loud to bear." Abby shrank back against me, and I put an arm around her shoulders protectively. We'd never seen Dad like this, the raw edge of his illness fully exposed. "Richard," Mom said softly, "you're scaring the girls." He froze, looking at us as if seeing us for the first time. The anger drained from him, replaced by a devastation that was somehow worse. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I should never." "I'm so sorry." Without another word, He grabbed his coat from the hook by the door and walked out. "Dad!" Abby called after him, but Mom shook her head. "Let him go. He needs to walk it off." "But it's freezing out there," I protested. "The cold helps sometimes," Mom said, her voice weary with the knowledge of a partner's coping mechanisms. "He'll be back." We spent the next hour in tense silence. Mom made fresh coffee, her movements precise and controlled. Abby curled up on the couch, scrolling mindlessly through her phone but not really seeing it. I washed breakfast dishes that were already clean, needing something to do with my hands. "Is this what it's always been like?" I finally asked Mom. "When we weren't around to see?" She sighed, setting down her mug. "Sometimes. The irritability can be intense when he's transitioning medications or misses doses. But he's never violent," she added quickly. "Not toward me or anyone, just objects occasionally." "Why did he stop taking his pills?" Abby asked, looking up from her phone. "It wasn't intentional," Mom explained. "But when depression starts to lift, there's sometimes a dangerous period. You feel better, so you think maybe you don't need the medication anymore. Or you get busy and forget, and don't notice the consequences right away. By the time you do, the slide has already started." "So he's back to square one?" I asked, feeling a crushing disappointment. "No, honey. Not square one. This is just a stumble. Recovery isn't linear." She checked her watch, a crease of worry forming between her eyebrows. "He's been gone a while now." As if summoned by her concern, we heard the front door open. Dad stepped inside, his cheeks red from the cold, his eyes clearer than when he'd left. Without a word, he went to the kitchen, filled a glass with water, and took his medication from the organizer on the counter. After he swallowed the pills, he turned to face us. "I owe you all an apology," he said quietly. "Especially you two," he added, looking at Abby and me. "You should never have to see me like that." "It's okay, Dad," Abby said, but he shook his head. "No, it's not. I promised honesty, not explosions." He took a deep breath. I got complacent. Things were going well, and I thought maybe I was stronger than the illness. But that's not how this works. I need to accept that this is a lifelong condition that requires constant management. The clinical language sounded rehearsed, like something from his therapy sessions. But the remorse in his eyes was genuine. "What do you need right now?" Mom asked softly. He considered the question seriously. "I think I need to call Dr. Levine," he said, naming his therapist. "And then I need to rest. Today is going to be a hard day. I can feel it." The simple admission that today would be difficult felt like progress compared to the years of denial we'd lived through before. "We'll manage," Mom assured him. "Girls, why don't you go into town for a while? Maybe see if any of your old friends are around for the holiday?" I understood she was giving Dad space to fall apart without an audience. The old instinct to protect us was still there, but it felt different now. Not a denial of reality, but a kindness. "Actually," I said, "I'd rather stay, if that's okay." Dad looked surprised. "You don't have to, Emma. It won't be much fun around here today." "I know, but we said no more hiding, right? That goes both ways. We don't expect you to pretend you're fine when you're not, and you shouldn't expect us to disappear when things get tough." Abby nodded her agreement. "Besides, I already texted Jen. She's coming over with Christmas movies and those weird marshmallow cookies you like." She directed this last part to Dad, whose eyes widened slightly. "You told Jen about me?" Abby shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. "Yeah, a little. Is that okay?" "She won't tell anyone." "Of course it's okay," Dad said after a moment. "I just didn't realize that I talk about important things with my friends." Abby finished for him. "Well, I do now. Someone told me keeping secrets isn't healthy." She gave him a pointed look that made him laugh despite everything. "Touché," he said softly. The day unfolded differently than we'd planned. Instead of Black Friday shopping or leftover turkey sandwiches, we spent it quietly together. Dad retreated to his room for a few hours after talking with his therapist. Mom worked on her laptop at the kitchen table, within earshot if he needed her. Abby and I made hot chocolate and played cards, our voices deliberately low. When Jen arrived with the promised movies and cookies, we set up camp in the living room with blankets and pillows. Eventually, Dad emerged, looking exhausted but calmer. He took a spot on the edge of the gathering, not fully engaged but present. As the movie played, I watched him slowly relax, occasionally reaching for a cookie or commenting on the ridiculous holiday movie plot. By the third film, he'd fallen asleep in his chair. The lines of tension finally eased from his face. "Is this what healing looks like?" I whispered to Mom when she brought in more hot chocolate. She glanced at Dad's sleeping form and smiled sadly. "Some days. Other days it looks like broken coffee mugs and angry words. But you keep going, keep trying." She touched my head gently. "I'm proud of you today. Both of you." "For what?" "We didn't do anything. You stayed," she said simply, when it would have been easier to go. Spring arrived with a gentleness that felt like a reward for surviving the winter. The semester was winding down, and I found myself thinking about home more often. Not with the worried anxiety that had plagued me for months, but with something approaching peace. Dad's texts had become a steady rhythm in my days. Honest weather reports from his internal landscape. Low clouds today, but visibility improving. Sunny with occasional dark patches. Storm warning, but I've got my umbrella ready. The metaphors made the hard days easier to talk about somehow, giving us a shared language for something that had once been unspeakable. Mom had started painting again, something she'd loved in college but abandoned somewhere in the rush of career and motherhood. "Your father built me a studio in the garage," she told me during our weekly video chat, turning her phone to show me the bright space filled with canvases. I'd forgotten how much I missed this. Even Abby seemed transformed. Her grades had improved, and she'd joined the school newspaper. "Just for the photography part," she insisted, though I'd seen some of her articles online and they were surprisingly good. She still rolled her eyes at half the things our parents said, but the bitter edge was gone. As for me, I'd started seeing the campus therapist Dad had suggested. Dr. Chen was quiet and thoughtful, helping me untangle the complex emotions of the past year. The guilt over forcing secrets into the open, the grief for the family I thought we'd been, the cautious hope for the family we were becoming. "You've been carrying a lot of responsibility," she observed during one session. "The peacemaker role is a heavy burden." "I never thought of it that way," I admitted. "It just seemed like someone had to keep things together. And now? Now I'm learning that it's not my job to fix everything, that sometimes things need to break before they can heal properly." She nodded, pleased with the insight. "That's a powerful realization. How does it feel?" "Lighter," I said after considering. "Like I can breathe again." When finals finished, I packed up my dorm room with a strange mix of nostalgia and anticipation. Kelly hugged me goodbye, promising to text over the summer. "You seem different," she said, studying my face. "Good different. Like you've figured something out." I smiled. Maybe I have. The drive home felt shorter than usual, the familiar landmarks passing quickly. As I turned onto our street, I noticed Dad's car in the driveway, not hidden in the garage as it once would have been on a workday. The front garden bloomed with new flowers, and the porch swing had been freshly stained. Inside, the house smelled of cinnamon and coffee. "Hello?" I called, dropping my bags by the door. "In the kitchen," Mom called back. I found them all there. Mom stirring something on the stove, Dad checking the oven timer, Abby setting the table. A normal family scene that would have seemed impossible just a year ago. "You're early," Dad said, greeting me with a hug. "We thought we had another hour to finish your welcome home dinner." "I hit less traffic than expected," I explained, breathing in the comforting scent of his aftershave mixed with whatever was baking. "What are you making?" "Your favorite," Mom said. "Chicken pot pie with the good crust, and berry cobbler for dessert. You didn't have to go to all this trouble." "We wanted to," Dad said simply. "It's not every day our college girl comes home for the summer." We settled around the table, passing dishes and catching up on small news I'd missed. The neighbor's new puppy, Abby's upcoming driving test, the book club Mom had joined. "How's work?" I asked Dad carefully, still learning the boundaries of our new honesty. He finished chewing before answering. "It's different. I officially went part-time last month. 3 days a week at the firm, focusing just on the cases I care about. No more corporate clients." "Wow," I said, genuinely surprised. Dad had always chased the biggest clients, the highest profile cases. "That's a big change." He nodded. a necessary one. My therapist calls it right-sizing my life, figuring out what I actually want versus what I thought I should want. And you're okay with that? Financially, I mean? The adult question felt strange in my mouth. Mom and Dad exchanged a glance. We've made adjustments, Mom said. Downsized some expenses. But your dad's firm has been surprisingly supportive. Mental health leave is actually covered in the partnership agreement, though apparently no one's ever used it before. Trailblazing by breaking down, Dad said with a wry smile. Not how I planned to make my mark, but here we are. Wait, Abby interrupted, frowning at Mom. What expenses did we downsize? Are we broke now? Mom laughed. No, honey, we're not broke. We just reprioritized. Canceled the country club membership we never used. Sold the boat Dad bought 3 years ago and took out twice. I believe her exact words were, Richard, that boat is a floating metaphor for your midlife crisis, and it's time to let it go, Dad added, his eyes crinkling with amusement. I stand by that assessment, Mom said, raising her water glass in a mock toast. The easy banter between them was new, or perhaps very old, dating back to before things had fallen apart. Either way, it felt like a gift. After dinner, Dad suggested a walk around the neighborhood. The evening was warm, the sunset painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. We strolled in companionable silence for a while, Abby slightly ahead, taking photos of flowers with her phone. I have something to show you both, Dad said as we reached the small park at the end of our street. He led us to a bench overlooking the pond where Abby and I had fed ducks as children. From his pocket, he pulled a small velvet box. Mom's eyes widened in recognition. Richard, she breathed. He opened the box to reveal a ring. Not a new one, but one I recognized from old photos. My grandmother's engagement ring. A simple diamond in an antique setting. What's happening? Abby asked, looking between them in confusion. Dad took Mom's hand. 25 years ago, I asked your mother to marry me on this bench. She was working 3 jobs to put me through law school, and I couldn't afford a proper ring. I promised her then that someday I'd give her the ring she deserved. Mom was shaking her head, tears in her eyes. I never cared about that. I know, Dad said softly, but I made a lot of promises over the years. Some I kept, many I didn't. When I was at my lowest point, I pawned my mother's ring to pay for things I'm not proud of. The admission hung in the air between us. Mom looked stricken. I didn't know, she whispered. I didn't want you to, Dad replied. Just one more secret in a marriage that was drowning in them. He took a deep breath. Last month, I tracked down the pawn shop. The ring was long gone, of course, but the owner remembered it and helped me find something similar from the same era. He held out the ring. It's not the original. Nothing can recapture what's truly lost. But I thought maybe it could symbolize something new, a second chance. Mom took the ring, examining it with trembling fingers. It's beautiful, she said softly. I'm not asking you to renew our vows or pretend the hard years didn't happen, Dad continued. I'm just asking if you're willing to keep building something new with me, eyes wide open this time. Abby and I stood awkwardly to the side, witnesses to a moment that felt intensely private, yet somehow included us too. After all, wasn't this the heart of what had been broken and what was now, piece by piece, being rebuilt? Mom slipped the ring onto her finger, where her original wedding band still sat. Yes, she said simply, eyes wide open. Dad's shoulders relaxed, as if he'd been holding his breath. He turned to us with a small smile. Thank you both for being here for this. It matters that you are. Are you guys, remarrying? Abby asked, clearly trying to process what she'd just witnessed. Mom laughed, wiping away tears. No, honey, we're just recommitting. To the truth this time. To doing better. Well, that was both weird and kind of nice, Abby declared, earning another laugh from our parents. We walked home as the streetlights flickered on, the 4 of us together but differently configured than we'd been a year ago. The old roles, perfect father, supportive mother, peacemaking older daughter, rebellious younger daughter, had blurred and shifted. In their place were more complex, more honest versions of ourselves. Later that night, Unable to sleep in my childhood bedroom, I crept downstairs for a glass of water. Dad was there, making tea in the dim light over the stove. "Can't sleep either?" he asked, reaching for a second mug without waiting for my answer. I nodded, taking a seat at the counter. It's always strange the first night back. He placed a steaming mug in front of me, chamomile with honey, the way I'd always liked it. We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, sipping our tea. "I've been thinking about that night," he said finally. "When you found the divorce papers, I was so angry with you then." "I remember," I said quietly. "I'm not anymore. Angry, I mean." He stared into his mug, as if the words he needed might be floating there. "I think, in a way, you saved us all, forced us into the light." "I didn't feel very heroic at the time," I admitted. "I felt like I'd ruined everything." He reached across the counter and took my hand. "You didn't ruin anything that wasn't already broken, Emma. You just made it impossible for us to keep pretending." I squeezed his hand, feeling the strength in it, the same strength that had taught me to ride a bike, that had built birdhouses and porch swings, that had nearly been lost to an illness that thrived in silence. "I'm glad you're still here, Dad," I said, the words inadequate for the tangle of emotions behind them. He nodded, understanding anyway. "Me too, kiddo. Me too." Outside, a light spring rain began to fall, tapping gently against the windows, like a reminder of storms weathered and sunshine ahead. Not a perfect forecast. There would be more difficult days, more storms to navigate, but for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what tomorrow might bring. Whatever came next, we would face it together, as a family, rebuilt on honesty, forged in the fire of almost losing everything. Not perfect, not unbroken, but real. And somehow that felt like enough.